When Gerald turned 73, he didn't feel like an old man. On the contrary, he thought, now begins the calmest time. No work, surrounded by family, with his favorite books and radio. In the evenings, he would sit in his large armchair, upholstered in soft fabric, turn on the lamp and take out his crossword puzzle book. Sometimes when his daughter visited, she would notice, "Dad, you're completely hunched over. Straighten up." Gerald would smile and reply, "It's more comfortable this way. And anyway, it's no big deal." He didn't think posture mattered, especially after a long career and the right to sit however he pleased. A couple of years passed. Morning rises became harder. His back ached as if he'd been carrying bags instead of sleeping. It became difficult to stand for long in the kitchen, and walks were tiring. He began complaining of nausea, dizziness, and sometimes even ringing in his ears. Doctors examined him thoroughly. His tests were normal, his blood pressure within range, and his heart was stable. The only advice he continually heard was to move more, get more fresh air. But even walks had become a struggle. One day he was referred to a physiotherapist, a man around 50 with a thoughtful gaze and a soft tone. He listened to Gerald, asked him to describe a typical day, and casually inquired about how he usually sat. Gerald, not thinking much of the question, described in detail his favorite sitting position in the chair, deeply sinking in, head forward, arms on the armrests. The physiotherapist paused, then asked him to sit the same way in the office. After a few minutes of silent observation, he said, "This is the cause. Your posture is compressing your entire body, your spine, stomach, chest. It's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous." At first, Gerald didn't believe it. How could the way he sat cause all this? But the doctor showed him on an anatomical model how compression in the lower back affects the internal organs, how leaning the head forward pulls the neck and spine and disrupts blood circulation. Suddenly, everything made sense. He remembered how his sleep had gotten worse and how he constantly felt fatigued. It wasn't age, it was his favorite chair and the habit of slouching. And at that moment, Gerald understood. If he didn't want to lose himself, he would have to look at this seemingly insignificant habit in a new way. After his conversation with the physiotherapist, Gerald began to see his chair in a different light. It no longer seemed as cozy. He started catching himself slouching, dropping his shoulders and extending his neck forward, and immediately felt tension in his lower back and neck, as though his body was starting to protest. The doctor had given him a simple task. Every time he sat down, he needed to check if there was space between his lower back and the backrest of the chair. If your back is completely pressed against the chair, you are sitting correctly. If not, your body is bending and a chain reaction begins, the doctor explained. At first, this seemed uncomfortable to Gerald, placing a small cushion under his lower back, pulling his shoulders back, and tucking his chin slightly. All of this required attention. He caught himself realizing that after all these years, he had completely forgotten how to sit consciously. The habit had taken its toll. As soon as he lost focus, his body instinctively wanted to collapse, to drop. But despite the effort, Gerald didn't give up. He understood now. This wasn't about appearance or about posture for the sake of beauty, but about health and even about life. One day, an old friend, Sylvia, came to visit him. She had worked as a teacher and retired a couple of years ago, and like him, she suffered from back pain. They got talking, and Gerald, energized by his new knowledge, shared with her the corrected posture that had helped him. Sylvia smiled and said, "Nothing will help me now, it's just age." He didn't argue, but asked her to show how she usually sat. She sank into the chair, her back rounded, shoulders slid forward. "See," Gerald said softly, "this isn't age, it's posture. Try sitting up now, put a cushion under your back. Do you feel how much better your body feels?" Sylvia was surprised. "It really does feel easier. I can breathe more easily now." Since then, they began supporting each other. At first, it was a bit of a game. Let's check each other. Who's sitting correctly? Then it became a habit. Gerald felt how, day by day, his body became a little freer. His back stopped aching in the mornings, and his head became clearer. He noticed how much energy had been wasted fighting the consequences of poor posture, and how little effort it actually took. Just a slight change in angle, a little straightening up, a bit of self-support. And most importantly, he no longer saw himself as a victim of age. He felt like someone learning how to be in his body again, his aging body, but still alive, strong, and worthy of care. A few weeks after Gerald started paying attention to his posture, he noticed something strange. His legs were less swollen by the evening, and the heaviness he had once considered normal for his age began to disappear. He remembered how the doctor had explained that improper posture disrupts blood circulation. When a person sits with their legs crossed or their thighs compressed, the blood vessels are squeezed and blood circulation suffers. Gerald was amazed. Could sitting this way harm him so much? He remembered his neighbor Douglas, who often complained about his bluish leg and calf pains. One day, Gerald decided to talk to him about it. Douglas, a little embarrassed, admitted that doctors had found a blood clot in his leg. He had almost been hospitalized due to complications. "Can you believe it?" he said. "The doctor told me I did this to myself. I said I loved sitting with my leg crossed over the other, pressing on my veins. Who would have thought that could be dangerous?" These conversations became a turning point for Gerald. He began reading more about how sitting affects the body. It turned out that improper posture could not only disrupt blood circulation, but also literally crush internal organs. A compressed stomach interferes with the normal functioning of the intestines. Food is digested more slowly, and the stomach suffers from constant pressure. He suddenly recalled Evelyn, an old friend of his late wife. At family gatherings, she always complained about heartburn and constipation. Gerald realized that she used to sit slouched, with her legs tucked in, pressing her stomach, almost exactly the way he had sat before. One day he invited Evelyn over for tea and gently told her everything he had learned. She listened with interest, and although she laughed at first, "Can it really be that I'm sick because of how I sit?" Just a week later, she wrote to him saying she had felt changes. She had added a roll under her lower back, started leaning back slightly to relieve pressure on her stomach, and, for the first time in a long while, woke up in the morning without that heavy feeling. Gerald began to realize more clearly, the body is not just a shell, it's a system where everything is connected. One posture can squeeze blood vessels, slow down metabolism, and disrupt organ function. But a single movement, just straightening up, changing the angle, can initiate the reverse process. And there was something reassuring about that. Even at 70 plus, one could regain lightness simply by sitting differently. Several months passed since Gerald started paying attention to his posture. His back no longer hurt, and he had become accustomed to sitting up straight, feeling how his spine became a part of the whole. But now something else caught his attention: his breathing. Gerald began to notice that sometimes he felt short of breath, especially during moments when he needed to concentrate or talk for a long time. At first, he attributed this to his age, like many other problems that come with growing older. One day during a conversation with his daughter, she said, "Dad, you're slouching again. Maybe you don't notice, but it's affecting your breathing." Gerald didn't argue. He knew she was right. As people age, their posture often deteriorates, and that affects their ability to breathe. But then, and it suddenly occurred to him, what if this slouching was what was affecting his lungs? He had heard doctors talk about how compressing the chest reduces the lungs' ability to expand fully. He remembered the story about Victor, a 74-year-old man with COPD who, despite treatment, couldn't breathe properly until he changed his posture. Victor had been advised to do a simple exercise, to stretch his chest and keep his back straight. Gerald decided to give it a try. He started spending a few minutes each day doing breathing exercises recommended by his doctors. His breathing became freer, and when he sat up straight, his lungs began to work much more efficiently. He noticed how clarity returned to his mind, how his memory started to work faster. He no longer forgot where he had placed his keys, and he stopped mixing up the days of the week. After a couple of weeks, Gerald realized that this was not just an improvement in his health. It was a return to life. He felt almost like he was young again, not so much physically, but psychologically. His memory had not only improved, but his perception of the world around him became clearer and fresher. This feeling was incredible. He no longer struggled with himself and his age, but instead, uświadomił instead, He was teaching himself to find harmony, even in the little things. He now looked at each new day with gratitude. Gerald understood that good posture is not just about taking care of the body, but also about taking care of the spirit. After all, when you can breathe freely, when your back doesn't hurt, and when your mind is clear, it's as if you're discovering a new life. At his age, this was a valuable discovery.